Welcome back to Let's Talk About It, a podcast sponsored by The Fuse and produced in the Elliott School of Communication at Wichita State University. I'm Bobby Berry.
And I'm Jessica Newman. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today's topic is imposter syndrome, that consistent nagging feeling that you just don't belong. So Bobby and I have asked 3 guests to join us on the show today who are going to help us understand what imposter syndrome is and also explain maybe what that looks like from an administrative perspective as well as a student perspective. So let's talk about it.
All right, so to kick us off, we'd like to welcome the one and only Danielle Johnson, the Assistant Director of the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. Danielle Johnson, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So we wanted to have you here to give us a deep dive into what students are feeling and how WSU is serving our students. So once again, thank you for being here. And I'm going to start off by asking you, what does your job entail in ODI? And would you please tell us a little bit more about what you do?
Yeah, so thank you again for the invite. Always happy to show up for you both, when asked, of course. So what I do, I feel like the Office of Diversity and Inclusion has created opportunities to be a number of things for the university and the community at large. But most importantly, we are a student-first organization department, and so we have the opportunity to recruit, retain, and really walk alongside all of our students, but particularly looking at our underrepresented, marginalized students on campus. So be it the LGBTQ plus community, our African American students, our Hispanic students, our multiracial, our Muslim students, whatever that kind of underrepresented marker is, that's really where we get to step up and educate. We also do trainings, facilitations, workshops in classrooms, working alongside faculty and staff, really pushing the importance of inclusive excellence that Wichita State has taken on as a strategic point to move us forward. And so that's really the job, helping students be academically successful and working with them holistically and making sure they're job ready, career ready, getting into those internships, having those diverse opportunities, growing their cultural backgrounds, and really understanding their identities.
Danielle, would you say that your job and your role evolves from year to year? Has the Office of Diversity and Inclusion always looked like the way you just described it, or has that something that's been kind of taking place over time?
It's definitely ebbed and flowed. So during my undergraduate experience, it was the Office of Multicultural Affairs, and then I had the opportunity to work in this space as a program coordinator. And from there, based on the personalities and really the resources that the people bring, we've been able to grow what that office looks like. That training component wasn't always there. There was a safe zone and a gender diversity training, which was more LGBTQ plus focused. There were folks that worked in the office that were able to kind of go out and facilitate, but those community partnerships, the grants that we're starting to land, that really comes from the strength of the different team folks that are in our office. So our director, Alicia Sanchez, her being over the Hispanic Chamber, there have been amazing partnerships there. Some of the appointments I've been able to receive based on my positionality in the Office of Diversity and Inclusion has provided growth in what we do. So we certainly are not what we used to look like, and I think every year we continue to grow and create more opportunities for students, faculty, and staff on campus.
Yeah, I definitely, in my time here at Wichita State, which has been about 8 years now, I feel like I've seen, and you mentioned it just a second ago, that transition from you guys kind of started as providing resources and saying you can come here, you can feel safe here, but there wasn't a whole lot of education to the rest of campus about, we don't just want you to feel safe here. We want, you know what I mean? Like our whole campus needs to be better. And that training component, which I know you've been definitely one of the core leaders of, I think has been really helpful over the past several years. So I think that's something I've definitely noticed. So when you think about kind of the culture of diversity on our campus that we're seeing now, do you see any parallels between what's happening in the greater society as compared to what is going on here?
I do. I think right now we're in the midst of a lot of racial tensions. We're seeing the death of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and these deaths are not new.
Right.
But the impact we're seeing on our campus, we do a series of real talks, and the Office of Diversity and Inclusion partners with Dr. Selena Jackson in counseling and prevention services, and we've seen a number of folks saying, we need to be educated. We need to diversify our curriculum. We want to make sure that we are providing opportunities and experiences to where we're educated about these matters. There are folks getting students walking up to them saying, I am struggling with the death that I'm seeing. I think I have PTSD, or I think that I am having some trauma. And so we're seeing a lot of things currently based on what's happening, I think, just in the media. But I also think with this adoption of inclusive excellence as a university, the conversation has popped up more. I think about what Bobby recently spearheaded with the Tilford Conference and making sure that we have the opportunity to not just see diversity and inclusion come out of the Office of Diversity and Inclusion,
Right.
but that it's a holistic campus feel with the President's Diversity Council. And so I think there were a number of initiatives, but I think right now we're seeing more of those conversations and education pieces coming to a head because of what we're feeling, that racial tension going on currently. And it's not just the race ethnicity pieces. We are having more conversations around LGBTQ+, gender nonconforming, what do the pronouns mean, what are we doing for our international students, how do they play when we look at domestic students versus international experiences. And so I think that college campuses across the country are paralleling with just society in general as it pertains to diversity and inclusion.
Yeah.
And one thing that, I mean, as a Black male, for sure, understanding that our experiences play a lot into how we navigate. And so, you know, when we think about some of those things, so our upbringing, mentors, relationships that we develop as we grow professionally, with all that being taken into consideration, next question I have for you is, what is your race and ethnicity?
Yes, so I am half Filipino, half African American, Blackapino, if you will, Blasian.
So do you feel like your race and ethnicity has impacted the way you have navigated your career thus far?
Absolutely. I mean, I think from my earliest memories, I was reminded, you are a Black kid. So not always even that multiracial aspect, but I was reminded every day, you're a drop of Black at least. So you have to show up. You have to work 10 times as hard. You have to, as a young woman, you have to be able to know your stuff. You don't get any chances. And so that has really shaped how I've moved. And then over the years, embracing more of my multiracialness, because I think a lot of times when you are biracial or multiracial, you kind of are accepted more by one group than the other. And depending on my skin complexion, how my hair looks that day, depends on who's fooling with me sometimes, at least growing up. But I also unapologetically carry that Filipino side that my mom has poured into me in those cultural opportunities. But yeah, I think I've navigated more spaces as a Black woman because of how people have viewed me and put me in that box.
So with that being said, do you feel that you're on an even playing field with a lot of your counterparts who are not of color? How do you interpret that, and what does that feel like?
Right. It's hard. I don't always think that I'm on an equal playing field. When I look at various folks' experiences and some of the things that they say, particularly in boardrooms, when I am sitting next to someone and they're like, oh, this is my experience, and I've never experienced that, or I've never been talked down to, or I've never felt like that. And in my mind, I'm like, well, I have. Or, oh, you got that position, and this is your resume, and this is my resume. And so I think about who gets put up for what I get asked to speak for, what spaces I'm allowed to be in based on what I do. And so I definitely feel that otherness sometimes, and that I'm bringing my A game every day, and you're bringing whatever level of game and achieving and getting to where you need to be. But I'm in this mindset of I have to show up, I have to work 10 times as hard, while someone else is just like, no, I'm here, I didn't have to work 10 times as hard.
Right. And one of the things that I struggle with personally, and you're one of the lead facilitators for Phenomenal Women on this campus, and I'm one of the facilitators or co-facilitators for Men of Excellence. And one of the things that I struggle with, and we had Dr. Provines here talking about wellness recently, and understanding how the way in which we communicate to our students, specifically our students of color, telling them some of the same things that you have said. We have to show up and show out. Our parents have told us you have to work that much harder. And so when you talk about being well, and we're talking about the rise of anxiety and depression and suicide across all races and ethnicities, those messages, to me, do not promote the mindset of decreasing stress, decreasing anxiety. So I always struggle because I'm like, how do I properly promote being authentic to who you are, and that you are good enough as you are. Then on the flip side, knowing realistically speaking, no, you have to be 10 times better. You have to do more. So I struggle with that. And so that's one of the things I always like to at least bring to the forefront But with that being said, I know you to be an amazing role model, and I think anybody that knows you, and especially a lot of the young women that you interact with, would say the exact same thing about you. So for sure, being a great role model here on this campus, and not only that, but in the community. So what has been the biggest lesson that you've learned as a woman of color, not only in higher ed, but within the community that you'd want to share with young women that are pursuing their dreams as well?
Absolutely, and thank you both for saying that. That made me feel good. One of the biggest lessons is collaboration. Collaboration is so important to me because when I think about what I can do alone versus the power of a team and being able to harness that, I certainly have gotten a lot of accolades. Alicia has as well. But when I think about the team at what we are able to do, right? Some of the things I'm able to do is just, hey, Quang, this is going on. So Quang Nguyen in our office, he's able to execute. When I think about Jamie in our office, he's able to execute some things. So being able to harness those that are around you and understanding that you don't have to take on everything by yourself. And so I really double down on who is around me that I can tap to be able to move this thing forward, as well as pouring into young folks the way I liked to be poured into. So I had a number of mentors really show me by putting me in spaces and saying, I believe in your ability, I believe in your leadership, go do that. Versus gatekeeping or saying that I'm not ready yet, or, my assumption is that you're not prepared. It was leaders putting me in spaces and believing in me, and then I felt like I could do this. And I do the same thing. So I turn around to those that I have the opportunity to mentor, and I say, hey, step up. It's time. You need to be in that room. You have the voice. Harness your voice. I'm a big strengths person. And so one of my top strengths is strategy. And I've harnessed that. And I think that being able to know the culture that you're navigating, being able to communicate and having a strategic mindset is something that's really important. And I pass those things down, particularly for the underrepresented folks. So they know I'm in this room, I'm harnessing it, and I'm prepared to be here.
Yeah, that's something I've noticed about you is some people are good because they're good at what they do, and some people are good because they make other people good. And I definitely have seen, I think it's from maybe the same strengths quiz, I'm not sure, but there's one where one of the words is maximizer, and I feel like you are a maximizer. Like you do a great job of not just putting people in spaces, but putting people in the right spaces and making sure that they're ready for it. I remember, this has been maybe a few years ago, but there was sometime I noticed that like you'd had several, banquets or something like that in a row where ODI had bought a table, and every single time it was full of students. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. Usually those, tables are filled with like rich people, and it was so cool to me that you guys always had a large showing of students there. So I think that has been obvious in watching you in your time here. So with all of that great work of serving our students of color and students as a whole, can you tell us just about some of the programs and services that you all offer?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about Phenomenal Women. So the Phenomenal Women and Men of Excellence are a mirror program, and it really focuses on our underrepresented student population. Both groups are predominantly African American and Hispanic, at least that's what we've seen over the years, and it's making sure that they feel supported. It's no secret that we are a predominantly white institution. That's not good or bad, but it's just purely numbers, a numbers game. And so it's important for our students to have representation, and we make sure that they're connected to groups like African American Faculty and Staff Association, knowing who the faculty and staff of color are on the campus, getting them connected to some of those community members that are already in those fields so they can see themselves, because that representation piece, if you've not seen it, it's really hard to try to get somewhere that you've never seen yourself in. Right. And so we have that opportunity. We have Promoting Academic Student Success, which used to be our multicultural student mentoring program, and that really focuses on the academics of our students. A lot of times we notice that our underrepresented students join a number of organizations, and sometimes they put their grades on the back burner. And so it's making sure that they're reminded that you're here to get a degree, and hopefully you're a 3-time graduate potentially of this university. But as a first-generation college student or whatever obstacles you may be facing, we want to ensure that you are connected to our office and know the resources. Another just quick perk is you get 10 free pages of printing every day. It's nice. A premium, right? You just come and go, get your printing on. It's a space that you can call your home away from home. That's a tagline we've used for years, and it predates Alicia and I and the team that's there currently. But we want students to know that they can come into a space and be their authentic self, where they'll be celebrated, where we'll look at those cultural identities, those foods, those things that they love. as well as make sure that they're empowered to walk that stage.
That's excellent. Is there a place that somebody could go to find out about some upcoming events or upcoming discussions that you all have going on?
Yeah, so go to wichita.edu/ODI events.
And we'll put that in the show notes page so they can click on it too.
Nice, yes. Normally we do a full calendar, but given the crazy COVID times, we're doing month to month, and so we want to be nimble. So if you want to know what our events are, go to that page. And then just general resources, wichita.edu/ODI. And we are WSU Diversity on all the social media platforms. We are not on TikTok yet, but we're going to get that popping soon.
Ooh, yeah.
Well,
Maybe.
we might not be getting it popping soon. You're right.
So the last thing I want to ask you, and you kind of just touched on it, was that of COVID. So how has that impacted your engagement with your students? Once again, they're home away from home, and how has that looked since we started back this academic year? And then secondly, do you believe, your own personal opinion, that COVID is really going to impact our students of color? And if so, how?
COVID has been a beast. 2020 has been a beast.
Right.
It's hard. I think that our staff and our students are experiencing loss in the sense of we were the space where it was packed and filled, and we're laughing and talking and having fun and being able to embrace each other, and that home feel is just kind of gone right now. How we've tried to remedy that is through Zoom programs and events, doing Final Fridays with the ODI. We've been able to take students on a mural tour. We did a kind of a kickback sort of event at Fairmount Park, but it's trying to find that right niche, because we know students are Zoomed out. They're in Zoom all day in classes. They're on Zoom in their organizations. So it's keeping that group of folks engaged and reminding them that we're still your home, we're still around, please don't leave us. And so it's been hard. When we think about our students of color and how they're dealing with COVID, I mean, it's hard already, but then when you think about those multiple layers, so now you're at home, maybe you're in a packed house full of family and children, so that's hard. But then not being able to see anyone outside of your home. The other thing is we also have students that are still throwing parties and hanging out. So when we think about what's that virus going to do to them, this kind of inevitable, if I get sick, I'll get over it, there are long-term ramifications. And what we see are people of color, specifically African Americans, are dying at higher rates and getting sick quicker. And so I think our students are not exempt from that. And we're seeing what could potentially happen long-term after you've had it, whether you're asymptomatic or not. Potentially lung issues down the line, heart issues down the line. So making sure that our students hear it and know it and they take it seriously. And I think it's hard for our staff because we kind of play that mom-dad role. We are not afraid to pull on a student, maybe talk to them a little differently than a faculty or a member or an advisor would be. But since they're not proximate to us, we can't pull their coattail. Right. So it's fearful, and when we think about just access to mental health, access in general, we know our first generation, our students of color, are working more hours, and they're trying to be on the clock and in class, and so we just know we have to step up and bring our A game a lot harder and be nimble, making phone calls, we're texting, because we're getting emails bombarded, so yeah.
Well, I just want to say thank you for your time, because you are a busy woman. So I want to say thank you not only for your time, thank you for the way in which you serve our campus and our students specifically of color on this campus. And so I just want to acknowledge you for that. And I want to also say thank you, because I think it's very important to, when you can have the opportunity, to say thank you for being a good friend, okay? Oh. So I want to say thank you, and I appreciate you for that.
Don't hug her, there's COVID, don't do it.
I was like, can I touch you? Thank you. I feel the same way about you both.
So once again, thank you,
yes,
and we will catch you guys next time, and we'll have our students coming up here shortly.
All right, now we have two students joining us for our conversation on the imposter syndrome. Cameron Morgan is a junior majoring in integrated marketing communication right here in the Elliott School. And then we also have Hannah Jasinski, a senior majoring in sport management. Welcome, guys. We're so happy to have you.
It's good to be here.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely.
So Cameron, I'm going to start with you. So as we dig into the topic of imposter syndrome, we would like to get an idea of your background at WSU. So as one of about 400 Black males on our campus, what has that experience been like for you here at Wichita State?
It's been pretty difficult, I'm not going to lie. If I didn't go through the Passage to Success program as I transitioned into college, I think things would be even more difficult, because finding people to relate with I mean, it's almost like non-existent. You can't really do that, especially in a lecture hall of like 400, 300 plus students. So finding the ODI and programs that help you actually like build those relationships, it's very difficult, especially with faculty members. I was fortunate. I mean, my mom works here. She's been working here for the past like 20 plus years, so she was able to point me in the right direction. But without that, it would have been like terrible, absolutely horrendous.
So how do you feel as far as, we talk about we want our students to feel comfortable, we want to create a safe space for them, we want there to be a culture of inclusivity here. So how do you feel, some of the things that you've said thus far, so do you feel comfortable on this campus?
Yeah, for the most part. Minus the things that have happened recently, yeah, I feel very comfortable. We have a very welcoming Greek organization. The multicultural Greek Council is very open, very welcoming. So going out to events like that, just being able to relate and see people of color on campus is fantastic, even if they're not, Black students. But the Black Student Union is great. Housing and residence life, I have lived in the dorms for 3 years, and so they do a pretty good job of kind of bringing people together. So I think there are definitely opportunities. You just have to be outgoing and take them.
And I think that's the really important thing is, once again, like you said, providing and finding those opportunities for our campuses, our students to feel welcome on this campus. So I think there is a little bit of responsibility also on the student, but then for sure as an institution, making sure that we have systems in place that you guys feel comfortable. So yeah.
Yeah. And Hannah, let's pose kind of the same question to you. Will you tell us a little bit about your background and just your experience on campus, maybe what organizations you're a part of, things like that?
Yeah, so I feel like I do a lot on campus for a number of odd reasons. I am part of Alpha Phi sorority. I am in the Ambassadors of Diversity and Inclusion, which is also known as ADI. I'm in Motorboard Honor Society. I'm also part of her campus. And I just started a new organization known as CHAMPS, which is under the Fuse.
Yeah, we were just talking about CHAMPS on one of our previous episodes, actually.
Take it on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So same question to you. What's your comfort level on campus? Do you feel like you are comfortable and accepted here?
I would say my first 2 years on campus, I did feel really comfortable in the spaces I had based off my background, but as time has gone on, it kind of felt a little off-putting. I've noticed because I felt like the whole, what do you want to say, like atmosphere of campus has changed a lot with everything that's been happening with COVID and like the Black Lives Matter movement, and that you can just feel people's change and like how they feel about certain things now.
That's interesting. I think sometimes we underestimate, and I think Jess had stated, and she asked this question to Danielle, but how our society, it's not happening necessarily outside this campus only.
Right.
What's taking place off of our campus is coming onto our campus. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it may look different, but it still sometimes feels the same. So I think that's one really key thing to keep in mind. So when we're thinking about our students from, all backgrounds, but just think about what is happening in society. And those same people that are being impacted by those things off of our campus are walking on our campus. Mm-hmm. And so they're still bringing some of those issues in. And I always say, even from a faculty perspective, my students don't struggle in my class because of the content. They're not struggling because of academics. They're struggling because they're trying to navigate things that are not having to do with their academics. Yes. Their personal lives and those experiences that they're having in society, those are the things that are impacting them and preventing them sometimes from succeeding academically. So thank you for at least shedding some light on that from your perspective, Hannah. So Cameron, I know you're also very involved here on campus. So can you tell us a little bit about some of the things that you're involved in as well?
Yeah, so I'm the current president of Kappa Alpha Psi. I'm involved in Men of Excellence, Student Government Association, Black Student Union, Housing and Residence Life. The list goes on and on.
Wow.
So busy.
Yeah.
So busy, just like your mom, right?
Yeah.
You guys like to stay busy. I'm curious, just from, when we talk about some of the things socially, things that you're involved with outside the classroom. So inside the classroom, can you at least count possibly how many professors of color that you have had in your time here at Wichita State?
One.
Wow.
Yeah.
In your junior year, that is, right?
Yeah.
I'm assuming you've taken many classes.
Yeah.
So one, so has that impacted you? Because I know sometimes representation matters, but sometimes it doesn't matter to everyone. So has the lack of professors of color impacted you in any way in the classroom?
Yes, 100%. So, for example, I have had one professor, and that was Dr. Marche Fleming Randall, which was kind of two, because Dr. Harrison was also doing some. He contributed a lot to that class, but going into spaces like that is very comforting. It's very easy. It's natural. But when I'm going into my communications class, my introductory communications class with 400 people in an auditorium, and we get to discussing some racial issues. I mean, there was one day that we talked about why it's not okay to say the N-word in class, and you have maybe 6 black people in the entire auditorium, and it's just dead quiet because no one has anything to offer or contribute. And so the only people of color are the only people like answering the questions or engaging in class, and so it's very off-putting to say the least.
So for you, when you think about representation, and can you say from your perspective why representation matters to you?
Yeah, because I mean that at the end of the day, like, that's what motivates you. There are so many things on this campus that deter you from success as a person of color. Because I mean, you look at the data, the statistics. We have 400, 500 black students on campus, and the average GPA for black students on campus is a 2.3, which means you're not matriculating. That also means that you're dealing with things that aren't necessarily in the classroom. Like, life is just happening, and nothing is really being done for you for your GPA to be that low. And there are numbers of services and things that are offered to us, but our students just aren't taking them, is what I'm assuming. So every day is like waking up and fighting another battle, like an uphill battle, just to get through the day, get through the week, just to, show somebody else that you're still there and you're fighting.
Wow. And I completely understand that. So being a man of color on this campus, the faculty side is also slim in
Right.
representation. So understanding and, putting on that armor, which is your skin, every day when you walk out the door to come to a campus and to still live in those experiences, can be challenging. It can be challenging in trying to figure out ways to navigate that feel authentic to you, but to still not feel like you're sacrificing who you are, your culture, the things about your culture that you love, but at the same token, you become very hyper aware of everything. You're hyper aware of how you speak, how you talk, how you dress, your attitude, your mannerisms. All of those things are heightened for you, especially when there's not that many of you to feel comfortable around. So yeah, thank you for that perspective for sure.
Yeah, and I'd be curious. Bobby and I have talked about this, so I'm curious if you kind of feel the same thing. Going kind of back to your story about being one of 6, I think you said, 6 black people in a room of 400 or however much. Do you feel like, especially with the way racial tension has been at the forefront of everyone's mind because of all of these recent events, do you feel like people look to you, white people specifically, as like, if a racial discussion is happening, that you have to contribute to it? Like in that situation, do they look to you and say, well, what, is it a lot of white people looking to you to educate us, is what I'm asking?
Yes and no. So in my experience, a lot of the white people who have demonstrated that they care will definitely ask me very respectfully if they can, if I could educate them. They would ask questions. They would say, hey, I don't want to make any assumptions. I don't want to do anything wrong. Would it be okay if you kind of elaborated on this? So I'm always more than willing to educate someone. Am I going to go out of my way to do that and make them feel bad about themselves? No, absolutely not.
Right,
but
right.
If they come to me and they just want to know what the experience is like, I'm more than happy to share that with them.
That's great.
Of all the things that you're involved in, Cameron, on campus, what would you say has been maybe had the largest impact on you in a positive way on this campus?
Probably my position as a resident assistant.
How so?
it gives me the opportunity to work directly with about 10% of our student population and just make sure that they feel like they have a place on campus to connect. It's very difficult, especially the first 2 weeks are critical for retention purposes. If you don't get them out of the rooms, if you don't provide them with something to do or somewhere to go within those first 2 weeks, they shut down. They typically stay in their rooms, they don't acclimate well. That can lead to mental health issues later on. So definitely getting that broader perspective is very enriching for me. And so I'm very passionate about helping people and making sure that they feel like they belong, especially because, I mean, it's difficult to feel that way.
Interesting perspective for sure. And Hannah, I'm going to kind of segue to you. So now that you're a senior, as you kind of reflect back on your time here at Wichita State, and then also think about in contrast to your high school experiences as well, how do they differ for you? So kind of taking a look back, if you will. What do those experiences look like?
So in high school, I went to a Catholic white high school with the same kids I have since I was 5 years old. So I knew them all growing up. But coming to WSU, it allowed me to have a voice in more spaces and feel comfortable actually speaking my mind about issues where I felt like I wasn't going to get shut down or somebody was going to yell at me because I thought a certain way. Unlike in high school, I was too scared to embrace being a Latina and talk about Hispanic culture and things like that because I was afraid of reformations and people telling me I was wrong for X, Y, and Z.
So with your, you said you're Hispanic, right?
Mm-hmm.
So have you always been aware that you're Hispanic? Sometimes certain places and environments that you're in, it becomes very apparent, very aware. You did say you went to a Catholic high school.
Yes.
So can you tell us a little bit about, your experiences of being Hispanic or Latina and kind of the level of awareness that you've had throughout your academic career?
Mm-hmm. I have noticed that depending where I am, I act differently. Like how most people do, you kind of act differently around people. When I'm in spaces that are predominantly white, I tend to stay more quiet and kind of in my lane because it's that fear again of people kind of jumping at you. But I notice when I go kind of more to my friend group who's more welcoming or people who really understand me and what I think, I'm more open and willing to talk about anything and everything. So I've always been aware and I always think before I act and I talk to somebody because it's just a nervous thing.
Because I know even with some of the roles that you have, with some of the work that you do in the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, and your sorority, some of those environments in which you're engaged in are different. So would you notice that you feel more at peace and or have a greater experience in one over the other? Those environments where you feel more comfortable, do you really feel you're at your best there, if that makes sense?
Mm-hmm. They definitely have flip-flopped a lot. So in my sorority, since it is predominantly white, I feel comfortable talking to those women because since my family's all white, I feel okay talking to them. In ADI, I felt a little nervous because I've never really had these conversations with other minorities before because I don't know a lot. I'm always learning new things. So I feel nervous to say something because I'm, and with them, they teach me a lot and then I take it back to my sorority because they all don't know a lot. So I teach them at the same time.
So sometimes it seems like the way you kind of describe that is trying to find that balance of, feeling comfortable where most people would expect you to feel comfortable, but for you not growing up in that type of environment also provides a little bit of reservation, if you will. And so that's just really interesting perspective, and I'm happy you kind of brought that to the table. I think because a lot of people on the outside would just say, oh, she does things in ODI, she should feel comfortable there. But, I think once again, our backgrounds, our personal experiences have a huge impact in the way in which we navigate. So that was a really interesting perspective. So thank you for that.
Yeah, it's an interesting dichotomy for sure that you kind of have to play both, Speaking of comfort levels with you, Hannah, you are a woman and a woman of color and you're entering a sport-related industry. So, very male-dominated. Is there anything that you're concerned about or worried about in that regard?
I think I'm worried about the just butting heads with non-minorities in a sense of just ideas or just being a woman in general. The world is scary for a woman, especially a woman of color. It just has to do with like the hierarchy of things and kind of being like, you're only 22 years old. What do you know? Or what do you have to offer? I think also the fear of like being tokenized as a minority and being like, oh, well, she's at the table, so we're okay if we do whatever.
Yeah, that's a really good point. We asked Danielle this when she was in here, and I'd be curious to hear your answer as well. Have you felt like that you have to work harder, or that you have, to prove something as a woman of color, specifically on a predominantly white campus?
That's kind of like the yes and no for me in a sense. Sometimes I don't because of my background with my family and everything. Things haven't always been hard for me. Like, my family has helped me pay for college. Like, they've helped me along the way. They support me in everything I do. But when I go to different spaces, I feel that I know that I have to work 10 times harder than other people, especially in the classroom where it's predominantly males and white.
I think that also provides a level of insight, because when you think about some of the experiences that you have in the classroom, where you feel that you're at a little bit of a disadvantage of being a woman in a sport-related industry, and then going into an environment where you feel different because you're a woman of color. So all these different identities that you have imposter syndrome with, if you will, and so kind of bringing those all together. And then as you get ready to head out into the professional world, and then you're thinking about some of those experiences that are going to be looming ahead of you, how do you wrap your head around all of that? So how do you make sense of it? And what do you tell yourself to keep persevering and pushing through?
I think about everybody who's kind of helped me along the way to get where I am. And I think about that I'm lucky enough to have like the opportunities I do, and that no matter what, I have to keep striving for the best for myself and for others around me, because without my parents and like my mom and everybody around me, I wouldn't be where I am today. And I'm just grateful for everything and everybody who's helped me.
I think for me, that's the biggest thing, is I always try to approach things with a sense of gratitude. Because I think regardless, I think when you have that approach, you're able to navigate a little bit differently because your perspective is different. You're appreciative for the opportunities that you have, because think about it, you're really going to be paving the way for another woman and another woman of color as they hope to one day also enter the sport-related industry. So, there's always someone watching, as I always remind myself of that as well. So finally, Cameron, so as you prepare for your professional career as well, which I can't wait to see all the great things that you embark upon, do you feel equipped to handle some of the barriers of being a Black professional in the industry that you're going into?
Yes, sometimes I feel a little too equipped.
Ooh.
Yeah, so one thing that I struggle with is kind of holding back a little bit, or a lot of it. I don't take care of myself the way I should, in the sense that I don't necessarily do therapy or things like that. So when I get to 10, I'm really on 20, because I stay at 10. So I'm learning that I'm becoming more unapologetic, right? So yeah. I feel like I'm actually very equipped. I'm doing pretty well in these classes, and so some of these classes are a little more difficult because they're more writing focused, and so I'm learning the technical skills that go along with that. But you have to be very politically correct, which is what I struggle with the most. So I'm learning my truth, and I'm not afraid of speaking my truth, and that putting that into words is what's the biggest struggle for me.
What do you think has allowed you to feel so equipped? Is it your academic experience? Do you think is it your personal upbringing? So what has attributed to that or contributed to that?
Actually, I would not credit that to my academic experience. I would have to just credit that to my college experience. So getting involved in things, ever since I got here, I've done a really good job of putting myself out of my comfort zone and challenging people who tell me I can't do something, even if those people are on my team. So somebody tells me I can't do something, my first inclination is to go do it. And I've taken that and I've ran with it, and I've done a really good job of doing that. And so, I can't really attribute that to my course load or my academic success. It's purely instinctive.
Nice. I like that. I like that. Determination. Self-determination. I like it. So, Hannah, I'm going to ask you that same question. Do you feel equipped to handle some of the barriers of being a woman of color in your profession?
I do. I feel that the ODI and the sport management department has really gotten me ready to go and face the world, and I appreciate them all so much.
So once again, I just want to say thank you to you both.
Yes, thank you.
Being able to see some of the great things that you guys have been able to do and accomplish on our campus, and seeing how it hasn't always been easy for either one of you, but you're both, on the other side of it, if you will, and you guys have really, I feel, have been great examples for people who not only look like you, but it's people who have some of the same experiences and some of the same feelings that you guys have had as you navigated through higher ed. So thank you for that. So once again, thank you very much, Cameron and Hannah. We enjoyed having you guys here today. So it's important that we have our student perspective, and we're lucky to hear from not only our students, but from our professionals. And so we're really excited to see what great things that you guys accomplish as you guys make your way out into the professional world. So once again, thank you for your time.
Yeah, and we
Absolutely.
appreciate you speaking so candidly as well. It's hard to do sometimes. So, and that's what our whole show is about. It's just about having honest conversations about things that maybe other people don't want to talk about, or they feel weird talking about, or whatever. So we very much appreciate that. And also thank you everyone who's listening. This is well into season 1 now. This is finishing up episode 4 of season 1. So as always, if there's something that you want to hear on the show, if there's somebody that you think we should bring on, please let us know, whether you're listening on Spotify, Anchor, Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. We'd love the feedback. And as always, please join us next time on Let's Talk About It. Bye.